now receiving transmissions from the moons of Tarvos and Skull.
This is Tarvos. Our operators are malfunctioning. 2 people are dead, several injured, 3 missing. Skull here. Also.
Oh, dearie me, ladies and gentlemen. Yep, no audio, can't hear you. Oh, I'm just sitting here rattling off everything, and no one can bloody well hear me. No one can. It's brilliant, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely brilliant. Well, anyway, now that I can be heard, this is Overload, aka Descent 4. For those who have played Descent, this would look very familiar to those who have played it. I mean, this is almost identical. Evidently, this was actually worked on by the original developers. I hope everyone can hear me now. I can see that I can be heard. I might be actually extra loud. But evidently, this was done by the original developers of Descent. And it really shows. Performance is actually pretty good. There's a little bit of slowdown here and there, even though there really shouldn't be. I think it's because I'm streaming and there's some frame rate issues. I'm not really sure. I'm going to blame it on streaming. I'm going to blame it on the chat, actually. Looks like Forsaken. Pfft, Forsaken. Everybody talks about Forsaken just because it has the hot chick. Descent was doing what Forsaken did like 5 years before Forsaken came out. So yeah, fuck Forsaken. But anyway, Forsaken aside, yeah, this is pretty much just Descent, but with modern graphics. Like, the gameplay is 100% identical to Descent. Now, of course, the menus actually work a lot better. For those who remember my Descent review, or maybe not remember it, I do mention that in the initial release of Descent, hitting escape would just exit the game. You had to hit like F1 to bring the menu up. It was really kind of annoying back in the day. In fact, I don't think I even knew that you could do that. But yeah, this is entirely Descent. What's kind of funny is that this is one of the best I don't know if that's funny. What's kind of awesome, there we go. My brain is tired from all the working today. Wow, I'm just getting completely eradicated by these goddamn robots. I'm going to blame the chat again for that. But this is absolutely epic in VR. I can't really play it in VR primarily because it makes me feel sick. But if I could play it without getting sick, it would be awesome. Because it just works quite well in VR. Nothing to really set up. It's just I get motion sickness very easily, which kind of put a damper on my desire to be a pilot. I definitely recommend getting Descent. You can actually get a source port for that. Quake 4 is going to follow on, I think, possibly this Friday. I'm not really sure what the rest of this week is going to be like. I thought I'd do a live stream today just because I have tomorrow off, which makes me very, very happy indeed. Music for this is really quite good. I think if the Steam summer sale is still going on, this is like $12, and it's well worth the $12. Now, this does have an element from Descent 2. You can actually send out GuideBot. GuideBot was a thing from Descent 2. It's a little too easy with GuideBot on, because he like leads you to everywhere you need to go, but it still is kind of cool that they added that. The story is okay. It's not amazing, but it's still... it's better than it could be. Let's just put it that way. And this plays quite well with a Xbox 360 controller. Like, extraordinarily well. Graphics look pretty good, but then again, this is a modern game, so the graphics are almost always going to look pretty good. Although, Dusk did look kind of... actually, even Dusk is kind of impressive for what it is. Now, of these retro-ish kind of games, I have to say that this is my second favorite. I know everyone loves Dusk, and don't get me wrong, Dusk is really quite good. But my preference will always be a Medieval and this. A Medieval and this are like neck and neck, honestly. And for today, I'm just doing a solo live stream. Rage is busy along with Raynick, so it's just me. Let's see. 64. And yes, Independence Day is tomorrow. Now, I was going to do a 4th of July video, but I just did not have the time. Because it was actually going to be rather elaborate. I was going to have some shooting segments. I was going to have a cooking segment, cooking some steaks. I did not actually have any time to go to the range in the last 3 weeks, just because of all the working. So I wasn't able to do that, which was quite aggravating to say the least. The steak thing, not going to get a chance to do that either, just because I can't just film myself cooking a steak. I have to set it up, have to actually make it look halfway decent. I'll tell you this, in the last review, the Rogue Squadron review, there is a, I think at most 10-second scene of me putting a game into the Wii. That took 20 minutes of setup. Because you can't just point a camera at the game console. You have to clear away space for the camera. You have to, block the shot so you can actually see it appropriately. You have to somehow squeeze yourself into a tiny little position to do it. So, filming me, like the gun reviews, filming those are not particularly easy. I basically have to completely disassemble the area where I film just to get a position to actually film the firearm itself. So doing anything like that is not, well, even just doing basic filming, like this is easy. This is just turn on webcam and talk into webcam. But like just doing basic recording crap, doing basic recording, that takes a lot of effort. So it's like, I really needed a lot of time to get that 4th of July thing done. It's just, there's just not enough time in the world. And I'm probably gonna die. I did so much better when the chat wasn't here. I blame you, Corey. Grilled steak. Quite good, Turok Fireseed. Quite good indeed. But I'm kind of weird when it comes to steak, though. Now, when it comes to people from Texas, they will almost always want whatever steak there is to be, medium rare. That's the popular one. For me, on the other hand, I have never been a big fan of that. I've eaten it that way, but my preferred method of eating steak is well done. I actually like my meat cooked. Whatever next. See, the good thing is, amongst my peer group, I can get away with that, though. Because I'll say, well, my great-grandfather was exactly the same way. So if you think I'm bad for doing it, you have to say he's bad for doing it. And he's dead, so you'd be an asshole if you said that was bad. That's the logic I use, at least. I never said it was consistent. He'll show up to see. It's going to be a solo live stream. They're all, sadly, kind of busy, though. 3 weeks? And a gas grill. Propane and propane accessories. Cooking things the way it was meant to be. Although I prefer charcoal myself. But propane is, of course, much easier to use than charcoal, I have to say. So we'd be making Hank Hill very happy. Yeah, this game does not like to be streamed that well. I can definitely tell that it's not as smooth as it should be. But then again, I have that set on 48 frames, whereas this is 60. Or it could just be that... Now, in this game, we, of course, have to fight various robots, just like in Descent, but they're called autonomous operators. Which actually sounds kind of neat. Even though it's just robots, but whatever. Autonomous robot organisms from the planet Cybertron. But yeah, teleporting is in this game, and it doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, if you have the ability to teleport something from point to point, wouldn't it make sense for them to have, like some kind of a folding space FTL drive? Just saying. Let's see. There's a hilarious hand-drawn comic panel of that particular thing with Bobby as Luke and Hank as Darth Vader. It is the most hilarious thing ever. King of the Hill was actually a very entertaining show, I think, right up until, year 5 or 6. it's one of those shows that definitely needed to die a lot sooner than it did. Because like with The Simpsons, it basically became absolutely horrible towards the end. The Simpsons, sadly, is still going on, even though, my god, it just needs to die.
Onto your position. Stand by for teleportation.
So they can teleport, but they don't have an FTL engine. Doesn't make sense to me. Now, currently, I found a really awesome fanfic called Starfleet's Skynet. Essentially, what you have, ladies and gentlemen, is you have Skynet not going evil and being a part of the Star Trek universe. And it's really quite an entertaining fanfic all around. I really like it when the fans do Star Trek. Star Trek done with the... Star Trek has always had a massive kind of logic problem in that the writers they get for that show aren't science fiction writers, so they don't really get the extent of the technology that Starfleet has on hand. It's kind of an interesting thing. When it comes to Star Trek, the technology is only kind of skin deep, in that it's almost like they have contemporary technology, but it's in space. You know, they don't really have, well, autonomous robotic devices doing anything. And, you know, when they do, they somehow gain sapience and go evil, even though that doesn't make any sense. And they don't take the technology to the fullest extent. Ultimately, though, the fanfic is absolutely excellent. Writing is actually pretty good. I'm a big fan of fanfics just because that's pretty much, for me, all I've got left when it comes to my favorite, like, series like Star Trek or Star Wars. Without fanfic, it's like you've got nothing. Now, speaking of Star Wars, I actually started a reread of the X-Wing series. I'm actually on book 4. Oh no, book 5, I should say. Book 5 is when the X-Wing series changed writers. The first 4 books were written by Michael Stackpole, and the next 3, I want to say, were written by Aaron Alston. Aaron Alston's actually dead. It was actually kind of sad. He died, I think, in 2012. Because he was actually a fairly decent Star Wars writer. He's not as good as Stackpole, but the X-Wing series also. The X-Wing series doesn't really fall to logic issues just because Stackpole and Alston are actual real writers. So a lot of stuff actually makes more sense than it might otherwise. However, there are a few, you could say, logic issues. However, that's where it comes down to, do you want a good story? Now, what we have here are crowd tubes. In the original Descent, what you had were just little sprites doing this. In this, they're just little cryo tubes, so it's less to animate. Even though, my god, you can tell this is an indie game. And you just rescue them just like you did in the original Descent. Except they're not just sprites waving their arms around. Let's see. Well, Peggy was the most annoying character from King of the Hill. That fanfic thing I'm going to try to write next year when I have more time. Let's see. You know, I don't remember what the difference between sentience and sapience actually is. I know what I can vaguely remember the difference, but like I'm tired, so I'm going to blame that. Sapience is not the same thing as sentience. Sentience, I think, would imply intelligence, and sapience would imply self-awareness. It's one of the two. I know that Star Trek gets it wrong. At least I'm going to say Star Trek gets it wrong. But as for my fanfic, I'm actually kind of editing it in my mind, and have been for the last couple months, trying to make it a little bit better. I guess I could talk about that for a little bit. So, for those who don't know, a number of years ago, I wrote this fanfic, which was the most self-insert Gary Stu thing imaginable. I kind of started I did a video that lasted, I think, like 45 minutes, kind of explaining like the first half of it, and then I never went back to it. basically, it's set during the event of Knights of the Old Republic, but kind of like goes into sort of a Star Trek versus Star Wars kind of thing. And I've always been meaning to write it down again, because I had it written down at one time, but it died. But I lost it because of a hard drive failure. And so now I'm kind of wanting to rewrite the whole thing to make it a little less Gary Stu, make it a little less, you know, egotistical. Right now I've just been kind of thinking about how to redo that Star Wars versus Star Trek part. Because that was what the Star Wars versus Star Trek part kind of entered the Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny kind of mindset. Where you had like characters from Halo and Aliens and stuff like that. You had Predators showing up. I mean, it was kind of crappy. And then you had like the Republic Commandos showing up. Now, all that sounds cool, and I made a way to, and I came up with a way to explain that. If you had the ability to travel to different universes, why would you not do so and get the most powerful characters you could possibly get? However, you run into the issue of why not just pick up Superman and say he wins the day. Because once you just get, like, you know, modern age Superman, you've already won. So that kind of, which would kind of ruin the whole story. So I've been trying to re-edit the whole idea of being able to go to a different universe. You have to have some sort of restriction, otherwise it can get really bullshitty. So the restriction I came up with was the concept of it takes a lot of power to do that. You can't go to just any universe, because you have to actually know what sort of multiverse coordinates it is, and you're not going to have them all. It's basically, it's still bullshit, but not as bullshitty as it could be. Fight between the Terminators and the Borg. That's an interesting concept. I'm not really sure which would actually win. Let's see. Our fan theories, the mirror universe, and the story involving a hazard team. Well, you know, the hazard team for the mirror universe would be a lot like a Warhammer 40k kill team, which would actually be kind of cool in and of itself. But back to that fanfic, though. At least have some restrictions on going to different universes. Like, have it be really power intensive and have only, like, a ship that can do it. So, like, you have to get... So, you'd have to bring in, like, only the most useful individuals. You know, like, let's say you go to, you know, the Halo universe. You'd want to pick up Preston Cole. You'd want to pick up, you know, Captain Keyes, Master Chief, and all the various Spartans. Then, like, if you involve Stargate, which I initially wanted to do, that's when you almost have a win the game button, just because of how powerful those ships are in comparison to, say, a Star Destroyer. Because, like, a Daedalus class ship should theoretically be able to take on a Star Destroyer and win. Just because of, like, you know, the Asgard beams and things of that nature. Now, if you haven't seen Stargate, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about, but, well, if you haven't seen Stargate, well, you call yourself a sci-fi fan? But all that being said, I'm kind of working on an idea right now for the whole... Now, the original Star Wars versus Star Trek concept was actually born out of another fanfic entirely that I actually reviewed, the Star Trek Conquest fanfic. It's sort of like, well, what if you tried to stop that Imperial invasion? How could you do it and stuff like that? And in that fanfic, it had a really dark incarnation of the Star Wars universe. Luke is dead, killed by an evil version of Anakin, which was actually how the original Star Wars universe was supposed to go. But Lucas, for whatever reason, thought that people would get confused between Anakin Solo and Anakin Skywalker, even though the whole idea of Legacy of the Force was still just a rip-off the original trilogy anyway. But whatever. But that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I've been kind of like examining the whole idea of this sort of dark Star Wars universe. Like, who would be left alive if, like, Anakin Solo became evil and basically decided to become a new emperor, killed Luke, and a wide variety of other things? Like, how exactly would that work? And I was thinking, like, what characters would survive, and things of that nature. Would there even be a rebellion? And in that fanfic, the Star Trek Conquest one, where this whole dark Star Wars universe comes from, there were some rebels still alive. And so I'm thinking, like, well, if there were some of those, like, who would be leading it? And so my thought is, like, okay, you could still have Mara be alive, but Luke dead. You could have the Republic Commandos still be alive, but really, really old. You could have Kyle Katarn be alive, but just kind of really depressed, because I was going to kill off Jan. So he's basically just sort of like a Death Seeker, so to speak. And so I had all those sorts of ideas. Like, you could have Wedge Antilles still be alive, but he's just, like, really, really burnt out, because he's been fighting all of his adult life and he ended up losing. And then it's like you could also still have, like, Corran Horn still be alive, but also, basically, I would take it, like, to its darkest extent. Like, a lot of these characters are still alive, but all of their, like, significant others are all dead. Killed by, the resurgent Anakin Solo Empire. And so that's just what I've been working on in terms of that. And kind of toning down, like, the God mode. Because, like, God mode is great, but it doesn't make for a very interesting story. Strogs versus Borg, the Borg win. Does the T-800 have a voice? I think it would have a speaker. I would think. Terran Dreadnought was more powerful than Sovereign. The Disney trilogy being a mess. Well, that's a good question. For whatever reason, the cool kids today like to say hot mess. Well, let me put it this way. It's a mess worse than fucking Chernobyl. That's how hot it is. It is literally radioactive in its horridity. Actually, I could totally take that analogy even further by saying that, like, it is kind of radioactive because it basically destroys everything it touches. Like, the Disney trilogy has literally split the fandom in, like, the worst possible way. Now, like, half the fans of Star Wars hate the other half. And it's brought on a lot of really toxic fans who don't really like Star Wars, but like to say they like it for, SJW cred. So yeah, it is pretty bad. In terms of storytelling, it's really bad. In The Last Jedi, they just say, "Oh, Admiral Ackbar got blown up," like he was nothing, which is especially galling since I am rereading the X-Wing trilogy, or not trilogy, X-Wing series. It's 9 goddamn books. And Admiral Ackbar is a major character. Admiral Ackbar has always been a major character, and to just have him get killed off screen. Now, the way Admiral Ackbar dies in the EU is he dies of old age. He literally lives until the Yuzhong Vong War, helps out during it, and eventually kind of dies off screen because he's positively ancient by that point. Which is much better than, oh, his ship got blown up. We don't even see him in Last Jedi. I haven't actually seen the whole film, but I am well aware of I've seen some scenes, and my god, it looks like crap. I'm eventually going to have to sit through it. I'm going to do it, and I'm probably going to want to get drunk afterwards, and I don't even drink. It's one of those things where when you let, art majors write a sci-fi film, that's pretty much what you get. Bombers that make even less sense than the Y-Wing. Actually, the Y-Wing makes sense when it's actually done right. Bombers that make no sense, fleet tactics that make even less sense, Star Killer Base, which makes absolutely no sense. The Death Star actually makes some sense in and of itself, but, like, why would you build a super weapon into a planet? How would you do that? It would take much too long to do. Even if you had replicators from Star Trek. There we go. I mean, it boggles the mind why you would even need to do that. Really, the Death Star is pretty much pushing, what you would need. In all reality, you don't need a Death Star. All you need is just a couple of Eclipse-class Star Destroyers, and boom, there you go. Star Wars is a joke now. That's really what it is. Go, Guidebot! I am tired. Well, the only reason I'm going to put myself through those films is so I can get the views. That's it. Because I wouldn't watch them otherwise. Like, if I didn't have a YouTube channel, I'd have no reason to watch them. But since I do, I can give my opinion of them and rip them apart and all the rest. And I can actually provide my perspective on Star Wars, which is, you know, from the EU's perspective, and being a massive Star Wars fan. Because, like, Star Wars is my favorite, you know, media franchise, so to speak. And I've been a big fan of Star Wars since, you know, I was, like, old enough to even know what movie was. But it's one of those things where that franchise died a bad, bad death. But, you know, all of them are dead. Star Wars, Star Trek. Stargate, I don't think died too bad. Stargate, you know, it ended decently enough. Stargate just became generic, though. Because, like, those direct-to-DVD Stargates were pretty bad. Like, the first one, Ark of Truth, wasn't that horrible. Now, in the original Descent, like, the reactor shot at you. In this, it's just, like, it's way wimpier. It's like, it just sits there. Like an asshole. I don't waste him. Oh, it switched to, not that. Not that. There we go. Missile pod. And boom. Now, I probably should have found the reactor, or found the exit before I blew the reactor, but whatever. Guidebot, save me! Oh, it's over there? Thank you, Guidebot, for those of us who are too lazy to find the exit ourselves. Oh, there it is. Now, you could fight those guys, or you could just fly away. That's a better idea. And just like in Descent, you fly out in an epic manner. Death Star versus Planet Killer. Well, the Planet Killer wasn't very big, so I'm pretty sure the Death Star is going to win. And the Planet Killer wasn't that powerful. I mean, the problem with Star Trek versus Star Wars is Star Trek wins in engineering, but Star Wars wins in literally everything else. Numbers, weapon power, and things of that nature. Because you gotta remember, with Star Trek, you're dealing with a couple hundred planets. With Star Wars, you're dealing with, you know, tens of thousands. Let's upgrade the old Impulse. Because that's what I always used to do back in the old Descent days. And the one thing that's funny about the Death Star, though, is there are, like, so many different origin stories of how they got the plans. You know, the original story was, of course, Kyle Katarn got them from, I think, like, Dara 4. And then it was, oh, that was only half of the plans. And then you got Rogue One, and, as far as I'm concerned, the only canon way to get the Death Star plans is this. You get Kyle Katarn getting half of them, and then you have, the Kestrel on, Tawara getting the other half. No one even knows what that other thing I said was. Because that, you had to read a short story from a book of short stories to even know what I'm talking about. Okay? You had to read... What short story was that? I think that was Tales of the Empire, if I'm not mistaken. At least that was the book of short stories. Yes, I am a Star Wars nerd. And yes, it's painful that Star Wars is now a joke. One of the things that goes to show you just how bad the new Star Wars fandom is there was, of course, that picture that Mark Hamill put up of him in the original cast, and everyone complaining about that. Now, going back to that dark Star Wars universe that I mentioned earlier, with Luke is dead, as are Han and Leia, you could potentially have sort of a Han replacement in the guise of Lando. You could say that he's still alive, so you still have kind of like a Lando. It's just have like a Han Solo kind of character. I always think that Lando is supposed to have been a replacement for Han if Harrison didn't come back. And I don't really have a problem with that. Lando would have made a nice Han replacement, actually. Much better than anything we'd get today. Because Billy D. Williams had the same level of charisma, but just in a different way than Harrison. And, well, they did dress in Harrison's old clothes. But that actually can make sense from a logical standpoint. because, let's be reasonable, Lando only escaped Cloud City with literally the clothes on his back, and so that's probably the only clothes he had access to at that time. And you notice that the next film, he actually has his own clothes, so there's that. Yeah, Lando is fine. And hello, Arnold Leeds. That was actually Phil. He actually was not German, but Austrian, and getting the schedules to link up is not an easy prospect. Because, like, it's only 7:41 for me, but I think it's like 4 in the morning for him. And I can't get on any earlier because, well, work. So trying to get all that to work, and then I'm like, God damn it. And then the weekend isn't easy either, just because, well, I got all sorts of... Now, like in the original Descent, you can restart the level, but you basically end up resetting all your various skills. I didn't save, but I don't expect to get that far in the game, because I'm not going to be recording for that long, or streaming for that long. Oh yeah, we're still on good terms. It's not one of those things where it's like we dislike each other and that's why he never shows up. It's just literally, it's 4 in the morning for him, and I just never have any time. Well, it's not even that I don't have any time, it's just getting the time to link up right. Because I'd like to have him on again, it's just like, I can either try to do it earlier, which I can't, or he has to stay up really, really late. I might try to get him on sometime this month, we'll have to see. Because I've been wanting to do that. Well, I'm glad you got to join this one, because this is an absolutely excellent little game. It is Descent 4, which I never thought was actually going to be made. Descent's one of those franchises that everyone has forgotten about, but it really was quite unique both in its day and today. I mean, like, how many six axes of freedom games are actually made? I mean, yeah, there was Forsaken, but that's like the only, you know, spin-off of Descent that there ever was. And I wouldn't say that Lando was a traitor. He was trying to protect Cloud City. And one of the things is, Billy D, being as cool as he is in real life, was actually always had to kind of explain what Lando was doing and why he did it. And, you know, I'm sympathetic towards Lando. I mean, he didn't really have much of a choice. It's either, hey, cooperate with the Empire or get your head cut off and then get replaced with someone else. It's like, it was a bad situation, and he more than made up for it years later. I mean, hell, he made fucking Terminators to fight the Yuuzhan Vong. Once again, if you've not actually read the EU, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. But yes, Lando really did make Terminators to fight a bunch of extra galactic aliens. And it was awesome! However, those Terminators were almost immediately forgotten. And yeah. You know what the big problem with Star Wars is, though? Anytime they start talking about tactics, ladies and gentlemen, they're almost Napoleonic with how bad they are sometimes. Like, realistically, the Yuuzhan Vong shouldn't be nearly as successful as they are outside of sheer numbers. Because they don't even have a ranged weapon. All they have is literally a snake that they throw at people. No, they also got bugs that they throw at people. So, against the modern-day U.S. military, they should lose badly. Because they don't have something that can shoot 5 miles away accurately. They don't have that. Now, they can still win, sort of, if they have, you know, orbital supremacy. They can just drop rocks. But let's be reasonable. If all you've got is a snake, and somebody has a rifle that can shoot accurately out to 300 meters or 300 yards, guess who's going to win that engagement? Now, like, when it comes to space, they don't even have computer. Well, they kind of have a psychic computer kind of thing, but even then, unless you're... The other problem with Star Wars is they need to add a couple zeros. They need to add 1 or 2 zeros so that the distances make a little more sense. Because, like, oh, he's only 200 kilometers away. That's really close in space distances. Okay, come on. It makes logical sense in universe because, well, they're looking out of a window in space at other spacecraft. See, that's the thing. Sometimes you do have to repeat yourself. It's just a book. You should really just relax. But I will admit, one day I was looking at my TIE Fighter, and I was thinking, like, you know, this is going to be the worst design ever. In fact, let's look at this, shall we? Here is the Lego TIE Fighter. You're a pilot. You can see out front and through the top. Even a modern-day fighter could shoot this down. How are you supposed to do anything? Now, in universe, you can, because if you ever play TIE Fighter, you have a whole suite of sensor software, and you can actually see. But still, who designed that? You can't look left or right because of the goddamn wings. But whatever. Yes, I'm still going to do the Quake 4 stream. It's either going to be this Friday or next. I would highly recommend playing Descent. I even did a review of it a couple years back. Descent can be had for really cheap, and Descent XL, I think, is the source port, and it works even on my modern Windows 10 machine. So, yeah. And yeah, Han could potentially have done that. TIE Defenders are indeed way better. Now, when it comes to like Star Wars fighters, the X-Wing is still my favorite. Although I am a big fan of the E-Wing. I'd love to get one of those Action Fleet E-Wings, but I'm not going to pay $300 for a toy. So there's that. Now, I don't know how many of you remember, there was a cookbook released to coincide with Star Wars. It was called Wookiees Cookies. I have that. I have no idea where it is, and I would love to know where it is, because I would actually like to make some food from there, because there's actually this sausage and biscuit construction they have called a TIE Fighter tie. You kind of like make the biscuit into like wings, and the sausage is actually the cockpit. It's really cool. And there's a few other meals in there I'd like to make, but that's the one that comes to mind when I think of the TIE Fighter. Can you remember? You know, that's how great Star Wars was. Even the cookbooks were fucking awesome. Okay, even the goddamn cookbooks were well made. You know, I mean, that's just... For those of you who weren't alive in the 90s, you missed out. You missed out on all the good stuff. Now you're stuck with Fortnite and Force Awakens. And that is just a sad, sad fate. A sad fate indeed. Not gonna be seeing a Fortnite cookbook, I'll tell you that. Eventually, I gotta review Twilight, just because I need to actually see if that movie's as bad as people say it is, and I want to actually give my thoughts on that at least in a live stream, if not a full-fledged review. Because I actually have started reading a few more paranormal-based books. The Monster Hunter trilogy, or not trilogy, I keep saying trilogy, I guess I got Star Wars on the brain. The Monster Hunter series, which is basically, imagine Dresden Files, which is actually kind of funny, because Jim Butcher actually writes a couple Monster Hunter short stories. Dresden Files mixed with lots and lots of guns. Lots and lots of guns. In fact, there's an epic gun called Abomination, which is a highly modified Sega 12 shotgun. There's that, and I also ended up starting to read the Vampire Hunter D light novels. They've actually been translated into English, and they're weird, but good. Vampire Hunter D is basically what Twilight Dude wishes he was. Incidentally, Twilight Dude, whatever the actor's name is, we're just going to call him Twilight Dude, is evidently going to play Batman at some point. So yeah, Sparkly Vampire is going to be Batman. Why must all my favorite franchises be utterly destroyed? It's just not fair. Chewy and Lumpy. No! And yeah, the CD soundtrack was pretty good. How old am I? I am 30. Doom Eternal? Well, as soon as I get the money, I'm going to pre-order it. Because, despite myself, I'm kind of excited about it. In fact, so excited am I about that goddamn game. And I don't want to be excited, because I bet it's going to disappoint me. Because it's a modern game, after all. But so excited am I about that game, I even had a fucking dream about it last night. Yes, indeed, I did. Where I was dressed up in that new Doomslayer armor, fighting a fucking demon. Although, and this is the worst part about it. Not only was I fighting that goddamn demon, I even had, and I know this is the new Doomslayer armor too, because the actual finishing shot is from a shoulder cannon blast. Although I don't actually call it Doomslayer armor in the actual dream, I said Mjolnir Mark 9, motherfucker. That was an awesome dream, actually. But yeah, that's how excited I am for it. And I don't want to be, because I'm sure Bethesda is going to ensure that it's fucked up somehow, but maybe not. I did actually pre-order recently, Wolfenstein New Blood or Young Blood or whichever it is. And I'm going to live stream that particular game. I might also do a review. I'm not sure, though. I'll just have to see how the time works on that, because I don't want that to interfere with Star Wars year. I don't know if Wolfenstein New Blood, Young Blood, whatever, is going to be any good. I saw the trailer, and the trailer looks okay. I don't like the southern accents on BJ's daughters, just because they don't sound right. They have a more stereotypically southern accent versus the Texas accent, which is something distinct. But I don't expect Bethesda to know that or care. Also, BJ doesn't really have much of an accent, so I don't know where they picked it up. But whatever. Let's see. Doom Eternal looks interesting. Actual live thing, however, reminds me of Wolfenstein 3D. I think the kid who played... That'd be kind of interesting. I've not seen the Gotham series. Let's see. Wolfenstein 2 was not that amazing. I mean, I thought it was pretty good when I played it, but it might not stand up to repeat playings. The story could have been better in Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus. But then again, that can be said of just about any modern game. We'll just have to see how Wolfenstein The Young Blood actually turns out. My concern is that they're going to try to SJWize it a little bit. I'm also worried that they might kind of like cut back on the gameplay and more on the cutscenes. But then again, you never know. I already pre-ordered it, so yeah. I will say this though. Pre-ordering the Ultimate Edition was actually worth it this time. Because they had that buddy pass system, so you can actually play with a friend that doesn't have a copy of the game. I mean, that is awesome. That is way worth the extra, I think, like $20. So they're already off to a good start. Now, if the game is as good as that, we'll just have to wait and see. Yeah, Commander Keen. You know what's funny about Commander Keen is I did not know that game even existed. Until the advent of the internet. I had no clue. I don't know how I missed that back in the 90s, but I never even knew that it was a thing. When I got to that level in Doom 2 as a kid, where you have Commander Keen, you know, like hanging himself, I was like, who the hell is that? Like, I had no idea. I thought it was like some sort of obscure joke, and I guess it was, but I had no clue that was an id property, like, at all. I had no idea. That was something that just flew right over my head. So a new Commander Keen game. I heard it was a mobile game, so it's probably going to be crap. I don't know. I have no real emotional connection to Commander Keen, so I can't say one way or the other. I did not rescue the hostages in this. So they're all going to die. But hey, you know what? I'm sure they were bad, and they probably deserved it. So yeah, at least we're going to say that. And boom! Okay, we gotta get to... Save me, guide bot! I'm tired and I haven't actually played the level. This is the first time I actually got to this this level. Eventually, I need to live stream Elite Dangerous. Because I actually do have it, but I still haven't gotten out of the hangar. By which I mean, I've tried to play it once and then never went back to it. Really angry with Commander Keen. My god. Of course, I imagine that guy was teased unmercifully about that.
We are now in position.
Because, like, that is a really unfortunate name. Now, in a World War II history book, I forget which one, there was evidently a real guy named Pinebox. And I gotta ask, when you're designing a family name, why would Pinebox be a name you'd want to? Why would you want to name your kid Pinebox? But Commander Keen just never even knew it was a thing. Hey, hold on a second. I want to know why frame rate seems off. Yes, I'm paranoid about frame rate and things of that nature. Let's see here. Yeah, I find it. Yeah, it's just the game. I think the game just does not like OBS. Yes, I'm one of those really fussy PC gamers where it's like, the frame rate's not... Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm not as fussy as I could be, though. Now, tomorrow, which is 4th of July, I'm going to work on some more Jedi Knight 1. Jedi Knight 1, you know, that is a game that the graphics have aged poorly, and I mean really poorly, but that gameplay is still really fun. I mean, it's much clunkier than Jedi Knight 2, but it's still, with just some new graphics, of which there is a graphics mod that actually makes it look a lot like Jedi Knight 2. It's still really quite good, but there is... I'm actually going to mention this in the review, but there's a segment in that game where if you don't choose the right force powers, or don't choose them at all, like if you choose to like save your points, you will fuck yourself, because you need force speed to finish part of that level, and if you don't have it, you are fucked. You literally cannot finish it, or at least I can't. So yeah, there's that. That's a bit clunky. You know, in Jedi Knight 2, they would change that to where you just auto level up like your core force powers. But Jedi Knight 1 did not. Ooh, green blasters. They're pretty powerful, but I bet they just eat energy. Yeah, they do eat energy. That's why it's always wise to stick with the basic lasers. Let's see. System Shock 2. System Shock. That is a game I've never played and probably should at some point. Oh, this guy's kicking my ass. Oh, he's got missiles. This didn't happen to the other fella. Now, 2020 is going to be interesting. There's a lot of games I want to cover next year after Star Wars year, but you know, it's just not enough time to cover every game I want to do, because like I've always wanted to do a James Bond month, because there's a bunch of James Bond games I'd like to talk about. 3 in particular. GoldenEye, which was one I really enjoyed back in the day. The World Is Not Enough, which is another game that I also enjoyed like a lot back in the day. It's not... Actually, I was going to say it's not as good as GoldenEye, but actually it's a little bit better than GoldenEye. It's a lot more complex in what you can do in it. And it's also graphically superior as well. I don't know why it's not rated quite as high. I never finished it, though. It's one of those games where I got to a point where I couldn't progress and just kind of gave up on it. But I also want to talk about From Russia with Love as well, where it actually has Sean Connery in it, which... The game itself is not that bad. In fact, it's really quite good. I'm either going to do the GameCube version or the PS2 version. I forget which is the most stable. But I want to finally do that. I also want to review Moonraker, because that is my favorite James Bond film of all time. I mean, you got James Bond trying to shoot down poison gas missiles so that the whole world is not destroyed. I mean, how awesome is that? It also introduces the laser, and it's like, that... I don't know why people hate that movie so much. I mean, Moonraker is fucking amazing. I mean, it has all the traditional spy stuff in it as well, and it has space. I mean, what more could you want? But whatever. People just don't have good taste. A new Blood game? You could say that Dusk is sort of like a Blood 4, or a Blood 3. Lego James Bond, that'd be an interesting thing. Mega Man, money. High speed, you can run and shit. Game hate. You know, since I was never a big fan of Mega Man, I don't really understand why people hated Mighty Number 9 either. I think because it had a bad marketing campaign. That anime fan on prom night thing really pissed a lot of people off. Now, I did finally watch a video on that Castlevania Symphony of the Night clone reboot kind of thing. I have no idea if that's any good, just because Symphony of the Night was a game I did not play back in the day, so I don't... Shit. So I don't really have any emotional connection to that. 90s equivalent of an SJW. Yeah, there was. It's funny you should mention that, because I actually was reading some period comments of the time. There was a guy named Jeff Cooper. He's very famous amongst the firearms community. He died around 2006. But he had this musings column that he used to publish for his shooting academy, and then it would later be republished in Guns and Ammo. He was actually relating something that Harvard did. I'm not going to say it here just because, well, Google will probably take the video down if I do. But it's very in keeping with the nature of today. Let's just put it that way. It had to do with Harvard basically separated students based upon privilege. So yes, SJW stuff has been alive and well at least since the 1990s. And was even commented about back then. I don't think they had any idea just how bad it was actually going to get. I mean, these days, if you have the American flag on a goddamn shoe, that's offensive in some way now. I'm not really sure why that is, but whatever. SJWs. They are utter insanity. But I'm glad to see a lot of these retro-styled games becoming really popular. I mean, thanks to the retro community, we have, another Descent. We have another, Heretic. Well, yeah, Medieval is more or less Heretic than it is Hexen, because the level design isn't utterly confusing like crap. If I don't finish this level in an hour, I'm just going to have to give it up because I'm tired already. I still want to see, another Dark Forces styled game. It's like if I was any good at game development, I would make it myself. Because Dark Forces and what that game series did, it's just my favorite kind of thing. Because you have really cool characters, you have really good stories, whereas you just don't really get that in something like, say, Doom or even this. Let's see. Yeah, Google is that. 1960s, huh? I have no idea. I'd assume that there's always been crazies like that basically just thrive on illogic. It's always rather interesting, though, to read what SJWs write. Because sometimes they come off as somewhat normal, but then it's one of those things where then they kind of stop being sane and just become utterly crazy. And what's always funny is if you go to different places where SJWs kind of congregate, whenever they complain about something, they always complain about the same three things every time. Even if it doesn't make any sense, they still complain about the same three things every time. Speaking of SJWs, I'm not going to wax too much on this, but it is something that I did come across today, though. So I do like to look at what the SJWs write, just because it's some great low-hanging fruit and it's good for a laugh. For those who know Warhammer 40k, and Warhammer 40k is awesome. It's not as good as Star Wars, but Star Wars is dead. One thing that was really funny was they were talking about 40k and how, the fan base is evil and everything. It doesn't have enough representation, whatever that's supposed to mean. And they went on to say that Slaanesh was offensive. Yes, Slaanesh is basically the god of pleasure and excess. They were trying to say that was offensive to certain individuals. And I'm thinking to myself, really? That's kind of a stretch right there. That's a bit of a stretch. I'm just saying, Slaanesh is the god of pleasure. I mean, that can apply to anybody. But that's how the SJWs think. If they can be offended by something, they will. It's like, if they can be offended by this game, they would. I am so dead. I've got zero... Oh, no, I'm not dead. Okay, never mind. I still got 94 health. Let's see. So that Overlord was your second. My first is actually a medieval. Dusk is actually my third. Oh, that was indeed a shit show. Ugh, that was indeed a shit show indeed. Evidently, the technology from the Schwarzenegger film Junior exists, and so males can get abortions. Evidently. Also, reproductive justice. Okay, so I think that must be like a strategy. Anything that will get, the clicks, just add justice in front of it. You know what I want, ladies and gentlemen? I want first-person shooter justice. There has not been a reboot or remake of Dark Forces, and, it's just, what are they afraid of a, strong, independent male character that can talk? Are they afraid of a strong, independent, female pilot? I mean, it's just, we need first-person shooter justice. That's what we need. Okay? And Hutts need to be able to get abortions whenever they want. For those who don't know, Hutts are actually hermaphroditic. So yeah. One moment, please. No wonder it's so hot in here. Alright, and I have returned. Alright, let's see. Well, because Dark Force is the first thing that came up. We also need role-playing game justice as well. There hasn't been a KOTOR 3, and I find that offensive. What are they against, robot characters? A strong, independent robot character known as HK? But it's a mess. I mean, it's just a mess all around. That's why, I limit myself to a grand total of looking at the news in the morning and then shutting it off the rest of the day. The way I see it, all I really need to see is the weather. And half the time it doesn't even matter, because by the time I get out of work, most of the rain has already stopped anyway. Exactly. Are they? Why exactly are the horrible? Why exactly is the toxic fan base of first-person shooters afraid of a strong, independent male with glasses and a beard? I mean, they're just anti-beard. Like FPS justice. That's what that needs to be a thing. That needs to be a hashtag. But that's just the way the interwebs go. And people seem to listen to that. My thing is this. Okay, so you've got, a game like Cyberpunk 2077. Okay. So, Cyberpunk 2077 is set in the future, right? And yet people are still complaining that there's just not enough representation, even though they've got, I don't even know. I don't even know where I'm going with that. It just aggravates me because it's you look up, you hear the, God damn it! Paintball stream, truck. Oh, NDAs, PC Master Race Justice. Let's see. Crowdfund. Yeah, this is the crowdfunded Descent sequel. At least I think it is. All these consoles stopping on. Really? Why am I not surprised? SJWs. Well, they've been complaining about that since Resident Evil 5. So, there's that. Oh, yeah, the whole SJW community complaining about games. They've been doing that since Resi 5. Saying that was racist in some way. Or racist, as I like to say. It's really? Really, people? It's... That's why I try to avoid these various communities like the plague. It's kind of like there was some history Reddit I went to, and they started talking about Battlefield 5, And you know, it was the first thing they had to go on about. That's right, they went on about, oh, the people complaining about the women in the game, they're all sexist. Like, well, I'm sorry, it's a blatantly ahistorical game that tries to peg itself as historical. By, you know, literally rewriting history. So, yeah, but, you know, that's the SJW for you. That's the social justices. This level is actually getting pretty tough. But then again, Descent itself was always really difficult. Like, the first level in Descent is pretty easy. Level 2 is pretty okay. But by level 3, man, if you weren't saving every couple of seconds, which I'm not, just because I want to come back and play this game where I can actually pay attention to everything. Let's see. Oh yeah, the Chiss Clawcraft. Well, the Chiss Clawcraft has a bad hyperdrive. Incidentally, unrelated to anything that I've been talking about, today I had one of those moments where, like, for me, it was awesome. So, I'm sitting at my desk, right, chugging down some water, and I actually start choking on the water, but I've got a mouthful of water. At that moment, if I start, like, coughing and, like, shooting water all over the place, I'm kind of screwed. I'm gonna like make a fool out of myself by doing that, but also getting water all over my desk, which I really don't want to have happen. So I literally, while trying to cough and breathe at the same time, chugged out a mouthful of water and just barely save it before shooting it all over the place. It was an epic save. Yeah, MK1, they were complaining about the blood and the gore. It's like, my God. How little they knew. How little they knew indeed. And honestly, all of that was like... I don't even know where to get this crap. Okay, let's switch to the, let's actually learn the controls. There we go. I'm just gonna say that I'm tired, and that's it. The Royal TIE Interceptor. Yeah, I never really rated the whoa. Okay, good. The internet is still up. Although I hate to cut and run in the middle of a level, but it looks like that storm's almost here, so I could cut out at any minute. Which is kind of like being Saved by the Bell, because I'm like really tired. So yeah, we're gonna cut this live stream short. I'll read the last comment. Which is actually kind of funny that you bring that up, Flawed Intellect. That is true. Tipper Gore was not actually a member of the right wing at all, and she was trying to censor rock and roll music. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, the censoring of rock and roll music aside, I am General Lotz, and I might either A, come back for Friday, or B, wait until next week. But in the end, I highly recommend checking out Overload, and I'm going to wish you good, Overload, and Jedi Knight 1, whatever makes you happy.